We're going to be joined by retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer in a moment. Before that, let's track the latest on the war in the Middle East with Fox's Aisha Hasni.
I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake. This was a great test because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
President Trump slamming NATO while hosting the Irish Prime Minister in the Oval Office today, who at one point defended British Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Keir is not Winston Churchill.
Keir Starmer has done a lot to reset the Irish-British relationship, but I do believe that he's a very earnest, sound person who I think you have a capacity to get on with.
The White House also battling internal pushback on the Iran strikes. Today, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, resigned, claiming Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation and that Trump bowed to pressure from Israel. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pushing back on that, saying the president had, quote, strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first.
I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
Two sources from inside the administration confirmed to Fox News Kent was not involved in briefings about Iran. Democrats claim the Trump administration has no plan for victory.
It seems like they're always a few hours away from hanging the next mission accomplished sign around here, and we continue to suffer.
President Trump's trip to China now officially delayed due to the conflict as administration officials try to calm Americans, admitting the longer this goes on, it would hurt consumers.
If it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, but that's like really the last of our concerns right now because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
Also today, President Trump once again calling for the Senate to pass the Save America Act, threatening Republicans that if they do not vote for it, they will not receive an endorsement from him. The Senate is now officially debating that bill, which could last for several hours to several days. At the White House, I'm Aisha Hasni, Fox News.
In the meantime, we just heard from the U.S. military that they're using 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions in Iran. Take a look. CENTCOM posting this, saying hours ago, U.S. forces successfully employed the 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions on hardened Iranian missile sites along the country's coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles in these sites, they say, posed a risk to international shipping in the Strait. Retired Marine Intelligence Officer, National Security Analyst, and the host of the Strap podcast, Hal Kempfer, is here with me. 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions. Have we used these before?
Not that I'm aware of. This is the first time I think this particular one has been used. We've used some pretty advanced deep penetration ordnance, but this one is, as they're saying, this particular one was one that we've never used before. So I have to take their word on it, although it does sound similar to some other things that we have used. But these, one thing they've been doing, certainly for the last, I want to say 5-7 years, is a lot of research and development on some of these unique types of ordnance that can take out these deep underground revetments, facilities, tunnels, that they built, looking specifically at Iran, but also looking at other places like North Korea and other places around the world. We're just seeing more and more stuff where they bury their places where they store drones and ballistic missiles and everything else. And this one, it said specifically it hit a tunnel where they had a lot of anti-ship cruise missiles right along the coast. And so it sounds like it was a very good application. One thing I should mention is we're seeing heavy bombers coming in. We're seeing B-1Bs flying over Iran. B-52s are in the area. I'm not entirely sure what the B-52s are hitting. However, if you take out the air defenses along the coastline, which is probably something that we are in the process of doing if we haven't done it already, that allows these larger bombers, things that can carry more than what a B-2 bomber can carry, that can also be forward deployed so there can be more sorties every day, to get in there and bring this heavy ordnance in to reduce these underground facilities, which will allow us to cause attrition of their anti-ship capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz, that much faster.
Hal, just before you came on here, we heard of a strike that happened in Ramat Gan. This is in central Israel. The camera's panning up at the upper portion of a building that appeared to get damaged by this strike. Moments ago, we were looking at this camera and they were surveying the ground conditions. There was certainly a strike that seems to have hit the Tel Aviv area. I'm wondering if we can get the Trey Yingst post up on the screen. I want to ask you, Hal. Trey saying 2 killed in central Israel during the last Iranian missile barrage. Cluster munitions raining down on Tel Aviv and surrounding areas. A reminder, Hal, that they've got a pretty beefy missile defense system in Israel, but every once in a while we do see something get through.
Well, one of the things we've been seeing is that the Iranians have been putting cluster bomb warheads onto their ballistic missiles. This is a little bit different than what we saw last June. This is a change. And what happens is when they come in, whether it's the Iron Dome or David Sling or whatever air defense system hits that missile, if it hits it and it's directly over an area, rather than destroying a singular warhead with a large singular explosive, it will break apart. In some cases, it will break apart before they have a chance to destroy it, and it will rain down these smaller cluster munitions. And that has become a more difficult problem to basically prosecute from an air defense standpoint. This has been a big issue. Obviously, many countries in the world consider cluster munitions to be illegal under the law of war, but not all countries do. We use cluster munitions, and it is a particularly devastating way of causing a lot of damage. But it does seem to be, for Iran, it does seem to be something they want to use, and for Israel, it's causing a lot of air defense headaches in order to try and stop this from raining down destruction when they take out the ballistic missile itself.
Let's talk about Joe Kent. Of course, many people have been talking about Kent today. We had a little bit of an audio interruption there. I got to ask you, because he's the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. You know a thing or two about counterterrorism, Hal. Kent resigned. He announced it today over concerns about the justification for the war in Iran. He said he cannot in good conscience back the Trump administration's fight. He, in a post, said that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and he said, "It's clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." Again, he's the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, so he's in charge of an agency that's tasked with analyzing and detecting terrorist threats. The chief reason he wrote in his letter, the top thing he put in there, is because he feels that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. How do we work that question out in our minds tonight, Hal? Did Iran pose an imminent threat?
Iran has always posed an imminent threat to the U.S. They have sleeper agents, sleeper cells here in the U.S. They have a global network of proxies, Hezbollah, which also has sleeper agents and sleeper cells here in the U.S. You know, they sponsor the Houthis, who are actively doing anti-ship efforts around the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden for the last couple of years, and then you have all the Iraqi Shiite militias that have posed a threat. And so, I heard what he said. I couldn't quite grasp his thinking on that. Maybe he didn't think that it is true that Iran does not have a ballistic missile, an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the U.S. So maybe he was thinking because they didn't have that ballistic missile, or maybe because he was thinking they haven't actually built a nuclear warhead, an atomic bomb yet, that maybe they didn't pose an imminent threat. Or maybe he was just thinking because they haven't done a big attack on the U.S. that they don't pose a threat. I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but I will say this. I thought Joe Kent was a very strange choice for NCTC. He's got some very, very strange ideas. When you look at what he said in his resignation, where he pointed fingers at Israel, and essentially in so many words, he was trying to point fingers at what he perceives as a Jewish lobby or whatever, Jewish influence or something like that. There was you didn't have to scratch very deep to find some ingrained anti-Semitism in his decision there, and I think that's what really bothered him, was that the U.S. was all in on fighting a coalition war with Israel, and that bothered him from his political, ideological perspective.
Ultimately, does somebody stepping down from this position impact the Counterterrorism Center's ability to fight against terrorism?
I would say, okay, I'm a retired intelligence officer. I'm a little biased, but I'm going to say this. I don't think Joe Kent leaving that job is going to slow them down at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure that whoever replaces him could step up and do at least as good, probably a much better job than Joe Kent could do.
Let's talk about some of the progress that the U.S. has been making in the war as of late. U.S. CENTCOM, Hal, just a few moments ago, they posted a short clip on social media. Let's play this really quick.
We continue to remain centered on our military objectives. These are well-defined and include eliminating Iran's ballistic missiles, drones, and naval threats. To date, our Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps aviators have collectively flown more than 6,000 combat flights, demonstrating the unmatched capability of America's joint force as we maintain air superiority over Iranian skies. And to the entire Operation Epic Fury team, keep pushing, remain steady, fight to win. Thanks so much, and Godspeed.
So that was just posted moments ago, I believe within the past hour, from the U.S. CENTCOM social media account. We're also, Hal, hearing that 2 top Iranian leaders were killed in strikes within the past 24 hours. That includes Ali Larijani, who was widely believed to be running the country, and also General Gholam Reza Soleimani, who the AP says led a powerful internal security force that crushed waves of mass protesters. How significant is their 2 deaths in the scheme of things, Hal?
I think it's very significant. Both of these appear to be kind of what's starting to become what they call a classic Israeli decapitation strike. And we call it classic because we saw some of the amazing stuff that they've done with earlier strikes, particularly, over with Hezbollah and Lebanon, and taking out Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. So they have done some amazing strikes, very time-sensitive intelligence, putting aircraft on mission or missiles on mission very quickly, and they did that in this case. Now, the thing with Larijani was he was called, and some called him the decision maker. All right, with emphasis on the part. He was widely seen as basically the guy calling the shots as far as what was actually going on. It wasn't really felt that Mojtaba Khomeini, and we don't know what his situation is. We have not seen or heard from him since he assumed was named the supreme leader. But it was kind of felt that Larijani was actually the basically running things. He has a lot of connections, close contact, a lot of confidence with the Revolutionary Guard Corps. And so this decapitation strike really took out the top decision maker, we think, that was basically running the regime at this point. So that's very significant. He's been there for a very, very long time. So he's not somebody who's easily replaced. He's widely recognized. So again, in terms of credibility of the regime, he's not somebody who's easily replaced. And then you have Gholam Reza Soleimani, who is the head of Basij. Basij is that really large, I think it's like 350,000 member pseudo volunteer militia organization. These are the extremist, ideologically aligned to the regime, police, I hate to say law enforcement, it gives them too much credit, but this enforcement element that was so intertwined with the horrific deaths of protesters in December and January throughout Iran. And he's been there for quite some time, too. So I think both of these strikes were rather momentous.
Yeah, so why would a guy, you touched on this, I'm hoping you can expand on it. Why would a guy like Larijani be calling the shots when there's a new supreme leader? And President Masoud Pezeshkian as well. Why not those two, and why somebody like Larijani?
Well, Pezeshkian, we're not sure if he has any clout at all. You may recall earlier that he was kind of almost publicly apologizing to the Gulf states, the Arab states, for having fired on their, having hit their hotels and other positions and stuff. And literally as he was giving that public apology, the Revolutionary Guard Corps was firing more drones and missiles towards those same states doing the same thing, which was kind of interpreted that he was sort of a figurehead president, but he wasn't actually calling any of the shots in terms of what was going on, that someone else was calling the shots. Why don't we think that Khomeini, Mojtaba, the new supreme leader, again, we haven't heard from him. We haven't seen him. The only thing that we've seen is that a news anchor read a multi-page, letter that was supposedly written by him, but we haven't seen him. And there have been reports that he was wounded or injured, maybe completely incapacitated in the same strikes that killed his father. It would have made sense that he was there. I haven't seen anything that said he was not in the same location when those strikes took place. Everything from he had a serious facial laceration and injuries to his feet, to he may have lost a leg, had severe internal organ injuries, and could be in a coma. And I say these things, you could say, well, it sounds a little conspiratorial. We don't know. That's the whole thing. Nobody's seen him. So Laurent was kind of seen as the actual decision maker who was calling the shots, who was basically running the country, running the regime's response to this war, and now he's out of pocket. And others can move up into his place, but they won't have the same gravitas, the same recognition, the same following that Laurent had. So I think it's going to be over time, I think it'll be effective. We asked the same question when Nasrallah was taken out by the Israelis. Will this really stop Hezbollah? And what we found out over time was, yeah, it really slowed down Hezbollah. Nasrallah had been there for a long time. And when you take out a key leader like that, it takes them a while to get back on their feet.
The time in Israel is about 2:40 in the morning. Live look at Tel Aviv. Benjamin Netanyahu sending this out today, saying this morning we eliminated Ali Larijani. He's the boss of the Revolutionary Guards, which is the gang of gangsters that actually runs Iran. Alongside him, we also eliminated the commander of the Basij, the henchmen of the gangsters who spread terror in the streets of Tehran and other Iranian cities against the population. We're operating there too, operating from the air with Air Force planes and with drones. Hal, let's bring things here stateside. Talk about what President Trump has been saying as of late. President Trump is saying that his pitch to NATO and allies of the U.S. to help secure the Strait of Hormuz has been widely rejected. Trump said in a post, quote, "I am not surprised by their action. However, because I always considered NATO, where we spend hundreds of billions of dollars per year protecting these same countries, to be a one-way street. We will protect them, but they will do nothing for us, in particular in a time of need," unquote. So Hal, from our allies' perspective, why doesn't it make strategic sense to get more involved in safeguarding the strait?
Well, there's a couple of things. First off, they've been taking a lot of verbal abuse, if you will, from President Trump for a while. He has said some pretty strong things. Denmark has had a really tough time. Let's just put it that way, because they have Greenland. And as you know, there was some talk about the U.S. militarily taking Greenland. So that, there's been some discussion there. And frankly, President Trump has been very candid in his remarks about other European leaders as well. I thought he was a little bit restrained on Keir Starmer, but the issue with these countries is twofold. Number one, they really, from a political perspective, you got to remember these are all democracies. They do not want to get pulled in to a Middle East war. The reality of their history is that, yes, they did come to our aid. The only time Article 5 of NATO was ever enacted was to come to the defense of the United States after 9/11. And these countries sent their troops to Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world in the global war on terror. And I think, for example, with Denmark, I think they suffered more deaths of Danish military per capita of any country in the world, more than we did. So they have stepped up. And of course, they looked at what came out of Afghanistan and how that's all ended and stuff. So they're very reticent to get involved. The other thing is they have domestic constituencies that are from the Middle East, that are Muslim, that have a very different opinion on what's going on with the war in Iran. And they're afraid that if they do this, and they have seen this in the past, when they step into these Middle Eastern adventures, missions, whatever you want to call them, that they will have protests in the streets and have some other issues that pop up as well. So they're really reluctant to stir that issue as well.
Last thing I got to ask you about, we heard this from the Washington Post earlier today. They say Israel believes that Iranian protesters will get slaughtered if they take to the streets against their government again, because they say Iran's regime is not cracking and the IRGC would have the upper hand on the protesters. Let's say, Hal, that the U.S. or Israel did want to support protesters. What avenues do they actually have to do that?
Well, the thing is, if we support the protesters to stop the besiege and to stop the Revolutionary Guard Corps from going out there, and at this point, I think these Israeli officials are correct that the besieged and the IRGC would show no hesitance in literally mowing down protesters, and they kind of did that in December and January. I think they do it even worse now because of what's going on. In their minds, the protesters would be seen as traitors to Iran because they identify the regime as Iran. And so they would probably be extremely brutal to any protesters out there. The only way that could be countered with military means would be if Israel and the U.S. were to do some very time-sensitive, very detailed tactical strikes on IRGC and besieged units in order to eliminate them, make them combat ineffective before they ever came in contact with the protesters. I have to tell you, there's a degree of coordination, calling in close air support, getting planes on mission with the right ordnance at the right time. It would be very, very difficult to do. It's not impossible. What we're doing right now, though, is we are attacking Revolutionary Guard Corps positions. We're attacking besieged positions. We're taking out their headquarters. We're doing all these things we can to disable those two components of the regime before any protests occur. And the hope is that when the protests do hit the streets, that those secular security forces would join them and provide a certain level of protection. But there's a ways to go. I think we're weeks away from seeing that happen.
Hal is the host of the Strat podcast. I saw that you just put out a podcast about the Strait of Hormuz. You can listen to Strat anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks, Hal.
All right. Thank you.